Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Savage Goose Show, where we talk about all things Savage Worlds from the past week, as well as any other news and things going on in the community. I'm going to switch that background so it's a little less distracting there for you. So today we are going to go over, again, like I said, some news from the past week. We're going to go over a licensee spotlight where we talk about a particular Ace licensee or a swag licensee and the product that they have. And we are also going to go over some Kickstarters and then our main topic. Which is going to be about how we can help the D20 refugees. The idea just being that lately we've seen a lot of people, it's kind of slowed down a little bit more recently, but we've seen a lot of people come into the community and asking for help because they've come from D20 games like D&D 5e or Pathfinder, and they're looking to kind of move out that into Savage Worlds and how we can help them kind of make that adjustment. So that's how we're going to talk about. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the news. All right, so first things, there's a Savage Pathfinder sale going on for all of November. It's going to end on December 1st. Basically, everything that is Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, whether it be VTT stuff on PEG's website, books, physical or PDF or both, anything that's Savage Worlds related on PEG's site for Pathfinder is on sale through the rest of the month. That's 30% off. It's a great time to get all of your anything you've missed in the past Kickstarters, or you haven't gone into Savage Pathfinder yet and you want to. It's a great time to get that book and kind of get your games going. So take a look at that. I got, I think, all of the Savage Pathfinder stuff except for the Crimson Throne, Curse of the Crimson Throne adventure path, and that's because I'm still working my way through the Rise of the Runelords adventure path. So I still have a ways to go, and maybe when we're done that, we'll do Curse of the Throne. But honestly, we'll probably switch it up to a different game. I think we're ready for something a little bit not fancy. So that's the one thing that's going on in on PEG. Also, there is a charity bundle for Chuck Rice. I believe this is still going on. It's just a bundle of different Savage World stuff as well as non-Savage World stuff to help support Chuck Rice, who's a game designer and someone who's been part of the community for a while, helping him to go through some issues with his heart and helping him take care of some medical issues. So take a look at that, and hopefully you get yourself some nice goodies from that. So one of the pieces of news I did see going through Savage Worlds channels is that Ross Watson is leaving. I'm going to put in clear quotes, leaving Anvil Studios, basically to work on his Accursed game with Baskerville Games and making it being updated for Suede. Accursed is a game I mentioned a couple weeks ago. I think it was last week actually, or 2 weeks. No, it was 2 weeks ago. As a good spooky setting for Savage Worlds content. So he's going to be working on updating that for Savage Worlds Venture Edition, and as well as some other ideas they have. But they're still going to, Brandon kind of mentioned on their article about this that they are still working together. Everything's amicable. There's nothing wrong. Just that they both have basically just projects they want to work on and focus on, and that's completely okay. So there's going to be going on some different creative paths and focusing on different things and to bring both those things to life. And knowing what kind of projects they're both working on, I'm excited for all the projects they're happening. Although I will admit I am particularly excited for getting Accursed in Suede because I would really like to get a physical copy of that book and get it updated for Suede. I've kind of been trying to keep all my new stuff Suede, like specifically Suede compatible. Not that it needs to be. It's just me being a little bit weird about things. So there's that. All right. So going from there, we're going to go on to some Kickstarters. I think I put in the initial slide that we're going to talk about licensees and then Kickstarters, but we're going to flip around that. The first Kickstarter to mention is the Savage Rifts Europa book. This is a Kickstarter from Pinnacle. That's going to be starting on Tuesday, November 12th. If you are into Savage Rifts, which is one of the most popular settings for Savage Worlds, you get like Deadlands, Pathfinder, and Rifts as like the 3 hallmark settings for Savage Worlds right now. Savage Rifts has had a lot of support. Rifts is originally made by Palladium Games, but not for Savage Worlds. They did an adaptation for Rifts to Savage Worlds back in Deluxe Explorers Edition, and then they updated those books to the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition and have released other books since then, and now they're working on the Rifts for Europa. So they'll be on November 12th. I personally I don't have a lot of stake in Savage Rifts. I have the original Deluxe Edition books, which, by the way, so hopefully maybe someday I'll get them to Adventure Edition and play some games of that. But I'm not sure about that. I have a lot of other things in my backlog to take care of, and so yeah. But if you're interested into it, go ahead and check that out. Coming next year from Star Anvil Studios is going to be the Secret World North America. So just a minor spotlight, not really a real spotlight, but I have my Star Anvil, my Secret Worlds book here, core rule book. This is the Templar cover for that book. And they're going to be working on a North America expansion book to kind of go along with the initial core rule book. And that'll be coming out sometime next year. It's going to be 2025. We don't have an exact date, but sometime next year. All right, so the next thing, and I should also mention that that's going to be for 5e and Savage Worlds. So they did the original book for 5e and Savage Worlds, and this one will be for 5e and Savage Worlds as well. Next thing is Vermilium is doing another adventure. They recently did an adventure Kickstarter for Blood Hunt for their book. And they're going to be doing another one called The Sick and the Dead. Vermilium is a really good game, and I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but the point being is that Vermilium is a this Kickstarter is happening also next year. That's been announced. We don't know yet. Don't have exact timelines or dates, but we know it is coming. But the reason I didn't want to talk about this particular setting too much, sorry, it's dry in this house. The reason I don't want to talk too much is that today's Ace licensee spotlight is going to be Vermilion. So this Vermilion is from White Witch Games and is designed by Ben Giles. We've had him on the show before. We did a episode about Vermilion and about the Blood Hunt campaign. And here you can see the book that I have here myself. This is a really, really fun game. And what kind of stands out about it is kind of setting. This is kind of it's a very I'd say a dark fantasy setting. There's the world is kind of scarred by ancient artifacts, remnants of a long lost civilization, but it's kind of been sorry, it's been kind of taken over by after some sort of disaster or whatever took out the civilization. The land is full of very tribal kind of peoples, halflings, elves, dwarves of different sorts and different feelings. And then you have these kind of humans coming into the world from this continent, from some other continent, and kind of taking over things. Things are changing. But in the game, you play as not really heroes, more like anti-heroes, which is exemplified by the fact that you start with more hindrances than you usually would. There's some other cool mechanics they have in here, like certain crafting rules. And there's a lot of good adventure hooks in here. There's an adventure generator that I always appreciate having in the book. So check it out. It's a really, really fun book. The art in here is wonderful. You can see the art there on the cover in the slide there. This is by Alex Veed. I apologize if I mispronounced that. I think it's like Alex Veed, Alex Veed. It's just a really fun game. I unfortunately haven't had a lot of time to actually play this yet. I've read through some adventures, and I really want to get a game of this going. But as everything, I just don't have enough games going to play everything I want. So more one shots are what it's needed. If you are interested in Vermilion, because this is one of my favorite settings that I've seen from any Savage Worlds producer. Just because it's just a really unique setting. It's really a really fun setting. Really beautiful artwork. A lot of detail that definitely went into it. Just really well produced. If you're interested in getting this, you can get the TTRPG link down below. There's a link to the Jumpstart, which you can just kind of feel free to just try out the setting without going, buying the book yet. But you can try out the setting from the Jumpstart. You can then get, if you want to get the book, you can through TTRPG as well. That is a print-on-demand option. And you can also get the Blood Hunt adventure, which is also down below. As well, again, don't forget the Kickstarter coming next year. So that kind of wraps up things for our Ace licensee spotlight. By the way, let me know if you like me doing this, kind of highlighting certain products from our Ace licensee and Swag licensee friends who have great products out there. So if you like me doing this, please let me know in the comments, and we'll kind of go from there. But from that, let's go ahead and move on to our main topic: how to help D20 refugees, the problems they face, and how we can help. All right, so let's go ahead and stop some sharing here. So the idea for today's main kind of discussion is that the goal is that by being aware of the problems that new players face, especially players who are coming in from other games, and especially players coming from D20 games like D&D, Pathfinder, and the like, hopefully by understanding the problems that a lot of people are facing, we can also offer better advice to other players to come in, be more helpful in situations where people are asking for assistance, or if we're running games for new players who are coming from these systems, making sure that we can be clear on how things work and how to best run the games for them, or give advice to them running games. So let's just kind of work away through this. I posted about a year ago a post about like things that D&D players have a hard time understanding when playing Savage Worlds, and I also posted something today about live stream, and then just asking the question like, what are the problems that you see players having? So feel free to leave some comments as well about things and problems that you see with people kind of adjusting to Savage Worlds. Again, I apologize. I'm probably drink a decent amount of water today just because my throat's feeling really dry. All right. So before we get kind of too deep into like mechanics and things that people do wrong when they play these games, one of the things that one commenter, and I've seen this comment before from other people, maybe from the same person actually, about introducing people to Savage Worlds, or people like dipping their toes in Savage Worlds, is not starting with a fantasy game. There's something about when you play a fantasy game, you're going to be kind of like making a lot of unfair comparisons between whatever that D20 game is and whatever the fantasy game that you're familiar with and Savage Worlds. And so one of the things kind of is to kind of like play a non-fantasy game to get a palate cleanser so that you can have a kind of a really fresh feel for what Savage Worlds has to offer as a game system. Specifically, this comment from Blue Sponge over on Reddit said that the Eye of Kato is a perfect game for this. I have that printed out in one of my binders over here. This is a very old adventure for Savage Worlds, but it was updated to Savage Worlds Adventure Edition as part of the launch of Savage Worlds Adventure Edition. Apologies. Here we go. You see it right there. The Eye of Kato. Very like just like adventure-esque game. Has guns, has adventure. You're kind of in the jungle looking for stuff. Just a very good kind of like palate cleanser to kind of give a feel for what Savage Worlds has to offer, and not giving it a very direct comparison between Savage Worlds and other fantasy games, because Savage Worlds fantasy is very different. Even Savage Pathfinder is very different of what you get from Savage Pathfinder versus what you get in Pathfinder itself, right? Even though they're like built with the same adventure paths in mind, the feeling of the games and mechanics are very different, and you're going to have a very different way of running things. All right, so real quick, I'm going to look through the comments over here. Vinl says, so the big thing I had with Savage Worlds was introducing setting, Deadlands for West, and rules at once. Yeah, that's fair. There's a lot of settings in Savage Worlds definitely add, not only assume the Savage Worlds rules, but then they have additional things that they're piling on top of that. The new setting, special setting rules for Savage Worlds. Like, oh, this is true in Savage Worlds, but in this setting, this particular setting rule is in play, or this particular power system is in play. These things are not in play from the core rules, and kind of getting that feel for things can be a little bit difficult when you come from a game like D&D, which has like the player's handbook, and then depending on what the GM's up to, it says usually it's like the player's handbook and whatever else they say is okay, right? So it is very nice to just have a just kind of like start with a very core foundational Savage Worlds game, just going to give you a feel for the game, and then moving into the settings once your players feel comfortable with it. Hampshire Doom says that he's late because daylight savings changes everything for Arizonians. Arizona is a weird state when it comes to daylight savings, because you can like change time like 3 times within like one drive, so it's crazy. Let's see. I'm looking through a few things here. One thing, I guess, apparently, Eye of Kato is known to kill characters. So Now, you say that as a bad thing, it sounds like, Hamster of Doom. At the same time, I think one of the things that's good for is teaching players the swingy nature of Savage Worlds, as well as the fact that Savage Worlds is a much more dangerous game system, I think, in a sense, than some other game systems, especially like other D20 systems like D&D, that in an instant your character could be dead. Whereas it's usually like very clear where you're at and like what resources you have in a game like D&D, where it's like, oh, you have this many hit points, I should be able to take a couple hits. And it's like, okay, no. In Savage Worlds, you have no idea what the top number is going to be, and on top of that, you also have no idea like what how hard the game system could be. Let's see here, going through other comments. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Lily says that interesting. I think fantasy is such a safe zone that might help players be more comfortable. Personally, having too close to realize keeps me from immersing my character as a player. Personally, having too close. Oh, sorry. Having too close to realism keeps me from immersing my character as a player. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think people are definitely familiar with fantasy, and that's what people are like comfortable with. But then there's an element which people can also kind of get that palate cleanse if they're going to be comparing systems. Knowing Lily and knowing that she is much more narrative focused as a player than versus system focused, I don't think that's necessarily a problem for her. But I think for some players it can be a problem if they're very mechanic minded. One of the things I saw about from one player or from one commenter on Reddit was talking about how players can tend to have he called a Pathfinder brain, where every rule need to be very concretely laid out, and this is how everything works exactly like this, instead of being a little more free flowing. And that's also kind of like one of the problems I see a lot is, or people mentioning, is that people come in and they like the idea of how free flowing the game is, but then when they try to do things, they feel like they're missing something because they don't have like, well, this was a rule in this game how to do this. What's the rule for it in here? And sometimes there are rules for them, and sometimes there's more specific rules for certain things like called shots, unsealed platforms, stuff like that. But those are all rules that you don't have to follow, and you can, as a GM, just say, we're not worried about that right now. I'm giving you this penalty, roll, and you just gotta go with it, right? And that's kind of way more of the feeling of Savage Worlds than other games can be, where they have very strict rules on how things work. And if you change that, there might be problems of some sort. So keeping that in mind as a thing that sometimes players can have a hard time with is just the mindset of how Savage Worlds just portrays itself as a game system versus like games like D&D and Pathfinder. And a lot of times I think people are coming because they are looking for a game that's a little more, maybe not simple, but maybe a little more narrative focused. One thing that Savage Worlds is known for is its pulpy natures. So I think sorry, basically leading into a lot of high action, bigger than life characters, all that kind of stuff, and a little more fast paced than other games maybe. So there's that mindset problem. Also understanding that damage is swingy, and that's just the way that damage works. So just embracing that kind of mindset, that anything can happen, right? So we've got to keep that mindset in mind as we tell people about the game, and as we introduce people to the game, as people are asking questions about the game, is that there are certain mindsets that they are still trying to probably break away from, coming from other, especially D20 games, but other games in general. Okay, so the next section I want to talk about is pitfalls that we see some players come into, either as game masters or players themselves. Things that they like, either they kind of like mistakes they sort of make. Sorry, taking my water. So first mistake that we tend to see out of game masters, and this is not something I necessarily see a lot of people ask about, but I think it's just something we know to be true of new players because it's hard to kind of get out of certain cycles. That the first one is like not giving out bennies. Bennies are there as a reward, and I think the key thing for GMs is to learn how to use them for their advantage, in a sense of rewarding gameplay that they want to see other games, right? The thing that I learned from Matt Colville is the thing the game rewards is the thing the game wants you to do. So if you have certain behaviors that you want to see your players, have in their game, certain things you want them to do. For me, it's role playing their hindrances, it's role playing their trappings, describing their trappings or their powers. It's describing the scene, describing what happens, maybe even like taking a little step forward and just doing more role play. So I try to reward bennies for things that I like to see in my game, right? So that's one of the things we want to see. And we want to be giving them out fairly regularly to encourage our players to spend things and to spend the bennies to re-roll things. And just a lot of times players aren't giving them out. The next thing we tend to see a lot of is player GMs trying to homebrew rules for things that they want to change about the game before they actually play the game as written, or things that they don't seem to understand that the game is designed to do it X that way. One of the things that I see often is people trying to basically introduce hit points into Savage Worlds, and like hit points is one of those things that like Savage Worlds very specifically does not do. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's like Savage Worlds does not do hit points, and we do it purposely. One of the reasons that people, game masters, mention it is that they feel like their players are feeling distraught because they are hitting, they're succeeding hitting the parry, but then they can't do anything to them after the toughness. Like they don't have enough damage to do, to actually hurt the person or shake them, and they feel like they're just getting to the cycle of not really accomplishing anything. I think there's some other problems that could be addressed there as far as like why that's happening, but I think that's one of those things that we can look into. Looking through some comments here. I'm gonna have to move this over a little bit. Give me a second here. There we go. That's better. Vinl says mechanically PowerPoints, power modifiers, and trappings. I tried to explain that trappings was a flavor of the power. Yep. Yeah, and I think that's going to be a thing for players that we'll get into for sure. Lily says, coming from D&D, outside trouble understanding what to roll and what to ask players to roll because there's so many specific things to roll in D&D, unlike Sway where it's much more broad. Yeah, so one of the things that like specifically for D&D that can confuse people a little bit is like you have perception and you've got investigation, and then like if you look at like I think like 3.5, there's even more things for like seeing certain things. Hearing was like, I think hearing was a different skill, or listen check. Yeah, it's like listening was different than perceiving versus spotting, all these different things. Whereas we roll all these into one skill in Savage Worlds called notice. Do you notice it? Insight. Insight was a separate thing, and that's again just kind of roll into notice. Like, do you notice that the person's acting weird? Do you notice that piece of paper on the floor? Do you notice the sound of werewolves from the next hill over? All just kind of roll into one thing. And so, in one sense, I think it's a very good thing. But I think this can be a hard thing for players new people to understand when they're coming from a skill list that's a lot bigger than what we have in Savage Worlds. I think in that way it's a nice thing because it's less skills to memorize. And Savage Worlds has done a good job, especially in the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, actually paring that down even further. Like the list used to be longer, and I think it's gotten shorter and shorter as time's gone on. All right. So first off, the next thing was people trying to homebrew things for things in Savage Worlds before they actually play the game and really understand how the game works. The next thing I'd say that some game masters do that maybe they don't need to do and they can work on not, it shouldn't do really, is making NPCs as if they were player characters. And this is one I have a problem with too, because I'm trying to balance out. It's hard, and that's a word that we're going to talk about here in a bit. And that's where this idea of balancing. But trying to make a character that seems strong and powerful. Some sort of big bad evil guy, but also making sure that they aren't too powerful and we're not being bonkers with creating them. Oftentimes the easiest thing is just to find a really strong character that's already been made and then tinkering with that a little bit, adding into different weapons if you want different weapons, changing out certain things for certain things, other abilities and stuff, but getting an idea of what a strong character looks like from existing things in either the bestiaries of like in the back of the book or in any of the other books that we have for Savage Worlds. So go with that. But a lot of times I think people try to make characters that they think are strong based off like what character options are for players instead of just saying nope. As a GM, you don't need to follow the rules of the same rules the players do. You can just add things to characters that you feel it makes sense to the character that you're trying to create and just go from there. And I think that's actually kind of a rule that I think that might be true for other games too. That might not be specific to 5e to D&D and stuff. Players coming from D&D. I don't think it's a specific problem that people have in Savage Worlds. So there you go. But going on from that, trying to balance everything. There is a system that supposedly works in Savage World in other games like D&D. Sorry, the CR system, which people have challenge rating system. People have kind of given it a lot of not being super helpful, and they've gotten better. There's been other third-party companies that have done a better job kind of creating these CR systems. I know Mike Shea from Sly Flourish, the Lazy Dungeon Master, he's got some stuff about creating good CR ratings for fights and stuff, making deadly fights versus challenging fights, etc. And that's not really a thing in Savage Worlds because of the swing. Part of it is just the swinginess of how the game system works. Your players could very easily, under some circumstances, just run up to a character, swing their sword, and that guy takes 5 wounds. You can try a soak, but isn't able to. Maybe a crit fails that vigor roll. We're done. That's it. You can't. You just can't balance the game. Now, there's some things you can try to do to prevent it. You can add certain abilities to try to prevent certain situations from happening, like saying, "Hey, you're unstoppable. You can't take more than 1 wound from a hit after soak rolls." Maybe you give them the hardy hindrance, where it says that a hardy edge that says you don't get a wound from being double shaken, stuff like that. There's things you can kind of mitigate to make things feel a little bit stronger, make things last a little bit longer. But in the end, the game is not designed to really be and allow for characters to for things to be balanced. And not to mention, characters don't really get that much more powerful as they level up. One of the things I've heard people say about Savage Worlds is that characters don't get more powerful; they get more interesting. And because of that, it's really hard to say like, oh, what's the balance for a veteran ranked character? And there's not really a balance to it. You know what your characters can do. You know what they can and cannot do. It's going to be way more about your tactics and how you run those monsters and those enemies than it is going to be about what particular abilities make a character strong. Again, I think there's going to be some things that you can do specifically to make things stronger. I do have a video about challenging your players. If you want to check that out, that goes over some tactics that you can use to help run your combats better in Savage Worlds. Some mechanics to keep in mind when running those. But you don't try to balance the game. That's not something like GameMasters. So that's a problem that's something we see a lot of in the Reddit community, in the Discord, and Facebook, is people trying to balance encounters and they can't. And I think that's some of the things that we just need to help people understand gently and calmly that they can't balance those. The next thing we see some pitfalls for Game Masters is, and mistakes Game Masters make, is that they have this mindset, and I'm going to attest right here as someone who has this problem, who feels that if a combat, thinking that combat was not hard if no one ends up wounded. I'll attest to it. I've had that feeling in my mind before, recently even, feeling that if I don't wound the characters, they don't actually they haven't actually had a hard fight. That's not really the case. There are other resources that are being attacked, if you will, inside of a Savage Worlds game, so Savage Worlds combat. If your players had to soak up a wound, that's a Benny that's been used, right? That's happened. We're good. You've reduced a resource there, if you had to use PowerPoints to attack, that's great. That you use any other resources, it's a good, that's happened. In my sad Pathfinder game, I've been done a lot of damage to my players, and but then after like casting some magic, rolling some healing, they're all good, and that's kind of given. And some have even been downed recently because of stuff like that. But it doesn't mean that because that doesn't happen, that doesn't mean that they aren't being challenged and there isn't actual, a hard combat happening here. So don't think that just because you didn't wound your characters, your players, that you haven't, you haven't made things challenging. And again, when we see people saying, "Oh, my combats aren't challenging. I can't think anything's challenging enough for my players," just kind of look at that side of things. Like, no, wounding players is not the criteria for a hard combat encounter. How many bennings did they have to use the game? All right, going back to some comments here. Hamster Doom says, "Yeah, challenge rating is known to suck pretty strongly. However, there are a couple different monster manuals out there that really improve the whole thing." Right? Yep. Yeah, there's a few things like Mike Shea's done something for Tales of the Valiant that made theirs a little bit better. I think the new book is said to have done things a little bit better. One of the things I found that I had been forgetting is that Savage Worlds Pathfinder has a built-in 4 wound cap. Yep, yeah. So that's something to note for Savage Pathfinder. It's also something to note for the kind of lethality of Savage Worlds in general. Is that base Savage Worlds does not have a wound cap. You could take 10 wounds in one hit, which means you can take most 4. So you need to soak at least 7 wounds, otherwise you're incapacitated. Good luck. But Savage Pathfinder does have a built-in wound cap saying that you can never take more than 4 wounds at once. So that's an important thing to note. Yeah, cool. Let's see here. Moving on. Lily says running combat is a lot more involved for the game master in Suede personally. Thinking about that, I will disagree. Mostly because I feel like you don't have to keep track of hit points, right? Not if you have like a swarm of like 7 pirates. Wink, wink. Lily GM's my Monday game, and she's a brand new game master. She's doing great. Her stories are always way better than any story I could come up with. So good as that. But as her first game running Savage Worlds, I understand she's one of those people who's having a hard time, and I get that. I'll say that I don't disagree that it is a lot more involved with GM, just because that when it comes to extras, it's either they're shaken or they're out, right? They don't have to keep track of their hit points. You don't have to worry about how much damage was it, that kind of stuff. You can do group rolls, which we've been doing for the monsters. Is basically saying, okay, instead of having all these monsters attack individually, all these extras, just like a one group attack roll essentially. All right, cool. Moving on. Just kind of moving along the game that way, and that's something that is the GM's prerogative to kind of move things along faster. That being said, Lily, if you have specific questions or specific things you want to call out, please let us know so that we can help, and we can also understand what new GMs are going through. So. All right, so looking at going back on into things. One thing that I think this is true of a lot of games, not just Savage Worlds, and that's adapting to player creativity. So I think Savage Worlds allows for players to come up with creative solutions, and it kind of a little more inherently. I think that the way that Savage Worlds games are written, we tend to be way more okay with just like come up with a way around this. And part of that is because we don't have particular rules around certain things, the way certain things work. Powers are allowed to be used, a little more freely the way that the way you want. Whereas there's not a paragraph of text for most powers on how the power works, and then therefore things are a little more confusing. And I think that there are some games though that like D&D, that you could be more creative. And I think there is a problem amongst D&D DMs as well, where they don't let their players be as creative as they probably want to be to play the game. So, kind of with creative solutions, and it ends up being less creative. And I think part of the reason for that is that in Savage Worlds, you could be a non-fighter very easily and be really focused on some of those non-combat things, and it allows for more creativity to come, or you can be more creative with your character, and therefore you can be more kind of creative outside of combat or with like other things as well. Whereas in D&D, a lot of your features are based around combat, and therefore all the creativity is kind of sucked out of other things because it's just like, I have all these things that create cool things that combos I can do with all these different feats for my combat. When it comes to like outside combat rolls, it's like, okay, roll persuasion, cool. Did you succeed or fail? That's it. So there's some things going on there, but making sure that as far as new Sagittal GMs are concerned, making sure that they do learn from that experience because they're not used to the experience of adapting what's happening for what their players are trying to come up with creatively. I think that's going to be that's going to be the main things that we talk about there. There's also some pitfalls for players that they kind of come into. The first one I'd say is trying to min-max skills as players. Trying to come up with the best character for certain things and basically trying to be a one-trick pony instead of trying to spread out skills across multiple things and trying to make a complete character. Savage does a great job of allowing you to create a character that is well-rounded, has both flaws and edges and hindrances. Edges and hindrances, has problems, but also has different things that they're good at, things that maybe they're really good at, things that they're decent at, have a few skills at. If you go look at my video about character creation, I gotta go through that. Like, okay, I have thinking about my character, I'm gonna say, okay, put one skill point in here, one into this. Oh, he's probably gonna be driving this game. Put one skill point into driving. He's taking a class on how to shoot guns, but he's not very good at it. One skill point into shooting, that kind of stuff. Whereas some people, there's like, going straight for all magic. I'm going to take, D12 in agility somehow, and we're going to go all points into fighting. So I got D12 in fighting right out of the gate, making sure, everything like that is perfectly. I'm going to be the best fighter out there. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. Like, I don't want to say that's bad. But one of the nice things about Savage Worlds is that there really isn't a good dump stat. We've talked about this before with my players. Like, what would be the dump stat if there was one? And, we have different arguments. I personally would say, if anything, maybe smarts, but smarts is tied to so many skills, really important skills like common knowledge, like notice. So it's like, oh, maybe that's not the best one to do. So yeah. First thing, pitfalls for players is just trying to min-max stuff instead of and focusing on combat rather than trying to be a little more well-rounded of a character. The second big pitfall for players that are coming from other games like D&D and such is treating wounds like hit points. And I think I've even made that same mistake when I first started. Saying, okay, instead of having like a pool of 20 hit points, you have 3. Well, wounds really are not hit points. Wounds, for multiple reasons, right? One is that wounds are, the big reason is that wounds are a -1 penalty to everything you do. And you're going to get worse and worse at things as you take more wounds. 2, they do not heal nearly as easily, generally speaking, as hit points do in other games. If you don't have magical healing, if no one is able to heal your wounds, that is going to take, like a week sometimes for you to get those wounds healed. And additionally, like I said, that you're going to get worse at stuff. Those wounds penalties, if you take 1 wound, well, next time you decide to soak your wounds, you're gonna have that -1 penalty. Not a good time. So yeah, treating wounds as hit points is not a good idea as a player. And we tend to see that a lot from new Savage Worlds players, especially coming from games like D&D. And that's just again a little bit of a mindset issue where you have to like really adjust yourself. Like, okay, we don't really have hit points here. Just everything is deadly and lethal and can hurt you. So just be more careful. Next thing is hoarding bennies. Savage Worlds players, especially people coming from D&D where you had inspiration, and you always kept that one inspiration until you needed it. It's kind of like when you play video games and you have all these different potions and stuff that you never know if you're going to need them. I'm going to save it for that last fight because I don't know if I'm going to need this for the big boss fight. And you never use it and you end up with inventory full of stuff. Well, same thing with bennies. People will sometimes end the game with a stack of bennies that they've, between the ones they started with and the ones they were given. They just never use them because they're like, oh, wait, what if I need it? What if I need it for a really important role? My players tend to be a little bit better about that. They usually will just save 1 benny in case of a combat and they need to soak damage, which I think is fair right now because the combat's gotten a little harder recently. I've changed the way I do things again. I watched the video about challenging players about some things I've changed recently that have definitely challenged my players a little more. On top of hoarding bennies, the other problem is they forget that bennies exist and that they can use them, and also maybe forgetting that they go away at the end of the game, at the end of the session. and you just kind of reset. So we try to encourage players in Savage Worlds to use their bennies, because those bennies do not get to carry over from game session to game session usually. Sometimes if there's something that happens like really late in the game that I want to like reward, but there's not going to be a chance to use that benny, I'll be like, okay, here's a benny. You can keep that. You can keep this benny for next session, just because I want to really reward that particular thing you did, but I know you're not going to have a chance to use it. So, but yeah, they'll forget to use bennies. And then there's also just not using social skills effectively. They tend to kind of miss out on all the other skills for non-combat stuff, and not really focus on them, and just kind of miss out on getting good skills for other things like intimidation, persuasion, and using them effectively. Okay, so that's the pitfalls that we see from some players. I'm sure there's other ones. Again, leave comments. Looking at the comments and are here. Lily says that I think that the cards that confuse you personally, and that the rounds are not as clear cut. Yeah, the one thing about Savage Worlds combat players, I do see this sometimes, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem for you to try change this. I like to say try play with it first. But sometimes people don't like the fact that they change combat every round. I love it. I wouldn't want to re-roll it. I like having the cards, but it's like you just hand the cards real quick, and you just kind of like, go down the line. You don't need like, oh, what'd you get? 11, okay, 12. You don't do that every turn, but the combat does change every turn. I like that kind of, who knows if someone's going to get the edge on someone next round or whatever. But I definitely understand that's not necessarily as easy as just rolling once. Okay, here's the combat list. You always know. It's got its pros and cons. We can talk about the initiative system and why I like it. The card one better, but maybe for another day. Lydia says, I like that there's lots of options to support in combat in other ways, like using a camera to distract the cultists so your party member can hit them with a chair. Referring to a game that we played recently, one shot that I ran. Yeah, so like there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do in Savage Worlds combats, and that's one of the things that people often forget, is just like forgetting a lot of the other options, because a lot of other games don't have a lot of options. They're like, okay, in combat, what do? You attack, you cast a spell, you shoot. What's one of those three things? Maybe you grapple. In Savage Worlds, there's a lot of other options. You can test, you can support, you can wild attack, you can desperate attack, you can do called shots to the head or called shots to the hand. One of my players recently, they were wielding a maul, and they're like, okay, I want to attack the weapon in their hand, not disarm them. They wanted to destroy the weapon in their hand, which is mean like, okay, cool. Well, you can do that. There's a lot of freedom in the fact that there's rules to kind of do that very easily. Just go ahead and do it. So allowing for those other kind of options in Savage Worlds. Yeah. So what I want to go over next is kind of rules that new players find confusing usually. Things that maybe players just don't understand, and what things that you might have to help them with understanding kind of what it means to do these things. So the first thing is like one rule that people have a hard time understanding is just increasing skills. How do you increase your skills? And they have a hard time understanding that like you're increasing a die type. That seems to be like, because it's a very unique thing in Savage Worlds, players do seem to have a hard time understanding, like, oh wait, okay, so I increase the die type whenever I want to spend a point in a skill. I don't think it's too hard. I think most people usually get it, but I think it does take some time for people to kind of adjust their minds to that. Second is, again, having those other options in combat. And then third is armor and armor bonuses. One of the things that we see all the time, especially I see it a lot of time on Reddit, is people thinking that the armor you buy for your head, the armor you buy for your torso, and the armor that you buy for your legs all stacks together. So instead of, what I mean by that is that all, like, each one's a +2, let's say. So it's like, I can't remember which armor that is, light armor, I think gives like +2. And then so I get +2 on the pants, +2 to the shirt, so I get a +6 to my toughness. That's not the way it works. It gives you a +2 to your toughness on that spot, each area, right? There is a way to stack armor in Savage Worlds. There's like a rule for like basically having like lighter armor underneath heavier armor, and how that works. If you want to do that, so there's like a stacking rule, but it's not stacking the way that people are thinking when it comes to like stacking like legs, torso, head when it comes to that kind of armor. So people seem to misunderstand that sometimes because in other games it's just I have plate armor, I have chainmail, and that's kind of all I need to worry about. And I think that's something that we could get rid of. If you want to get rid of that in your game, say yes, you bought chainmail, cool, you got chainmail over your whole body. You can do that. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. Sorry, one second here. I also see a lot of confusion around like taking wounds and shaken and fatigue conditions. And there's all those different like things that can happen. The big one I think is understanding that shaken. If you're shaken again while you're already shaken, is a wound, and if you get a raise while someone's shaken, it's still only one wound. The easy way I've kind of worded it is saying that whenever you roll against someone for damage, every raise is one wound. End statement. Just every raise is one wound. Every situation, at all time, one raise, one wound. If you only shake someone and they're shaken, you get a bonus. Your hit didn't do nothing. You still also wound them. So it's something that people always, for some reason, I think that if they're shaken already and they get a hit at a raise, they get 2 wounds, and that's not true. It's just like if you get a raise, you get 1 wound. If you get shaken while you're already shaken, also 1 wound. So it's just one of those things I see people have a hard time with. The last rule that I wanted to mention is extras versus wild cards, especially for GMs, or even just like understanding the wild die itself. Understanding like that when you roll your wild die and your other die, you're taking the higher of the two, and they both ace, but you're always taking the higher of those two, except when it comes to damage, and damage being combined rolls versus other times. For some reason, I've noticed that has caused some confusion in understanding how that works. So let's see here. So that's all the things I have. Let's go and look through the comments. Voltan42 says, something I've always liked is that even 2 similarly stated characters can feel wildly different. Yeah, I think that's very true in Savage Worlds. I don't think it's necessarily not true in other games like D&D. I think I think there's only I think there's more options to make 2 similar characters feel wildly different in Savage Worlds versus like other games. Just because characters can have a lot of, maybe they have they're both good at fighting, but maybe their other skills, like one's really good at intimidating, but the other person's really good at, I don't know, hacking, right? You'd have 2 people who have very different characters from hindrances and edges and other skills, and maybe they're both doing the same thing in combat. So, Puer, I know how to say this. I drank this tea before. Puering teacup, preparing to run Savage Worlds for the first time ever. Almost got the 3-shot ready for my players. Good luck, Puering. You've been in here before, I'm pretty sure. And here's your first time running? Well, good luck. I wish you all the luck in the world, and I hope you have a lot of fun. Let us know what happens and what things you struggled with so we can know how we can help others in the future. Love to hear about that. Let's see here. Wild dice and crits not allowed to be Benny. Took a while to sync. To be fair, critical failures can't be Benny. Just be clear on that. Not that there's crits in Savage Worlds, but yeah, critical failures cannot be Benny. Which you can get rid of with a setting rule called Dumb Luck, where you can spend a Benny to reroll ones. You just basically you succeed forward, like you can re-roll, and if you succeed, you succeed, but you still do something that causes you a setback. One of the examples I gave is if you roll, let's say you rolled thievery, and you're trying to pick a lock, and you roll crit fail. Well, you still spend money to re-roll that, and maybe you successfully unlock the door, but in the process you break your pick. So dumb luck is a really cool setting rule to kind of go around that. That is completely up to you. Lily also says, yes, Wildcards with extras has been hard. I love naming all my NPCs, even for me, but I never share them with y'all. Yeah. Yeah, but it makes it hard to say a character is a extra when they're named. That's something I've had to kind of get over a little bit, because when you initially talk about talk to people about like, oh, what's a wild card versus an extra? It's like, oh, well, if it's named, it's a wild card. Well, that's not necessarily true in certain games, especially if you start naming everybody. One of my players has a character in their backstory, actually their character's wife, and currently their character's wife, we have decided it is an extra. She may change to a wild card in the future if she becomes an important part of the game for some reason. But currently, she's an extra. Let's see here. Man, I'm just talking now. It's been mentioned working with a science fantasy setting and interpreting that as Savage Worlds toolkit, setting based on a science fantasy game I love. Well, now you gotta tell us what science fantasy game it is. You can say like, oh, what's sci-fi game? Oh, it's based on a game I like. Well, what is it? Is it Halo? Is it? I guess Halo's not fantasy. It's just sci-fi. I guess a little bit fancy. I don't know. Let's see. Everything says max healing of 2 and take time 10 minutes for each wound the character has. Max healing of 2. Can the healing roll only heal 2 wounds? See, I'm about to learn something, Vinl. Because I don't know if I ever knew that. I might have known it, and maybe it just never came up, and then forgotten. Got my nice 5th edition printing, or 5th print run version with the bookmarks in here now, and I'm loving it. It's nice having a fifth print run versus a first print run. Healing 96. There we go. Healing. Success moves 1 wound and raise moves 2. Oh, yeah, fair enough. Max 2. I'll get that in mind. Let's see here. Yes. Yeah. I'd say Science Fantasy would be great. Let's see here. Here we go. Phantasy Star Online. I've heard of this game. I just don't know anything about it. So sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. One other thing I want to mention about, I did not mention about GM pitfalls, is not using subsystems. Savage World subsystems are one of my favorite things about the game. I know some people don't like subsystems, like Mike Shea, but I love the way we do subsystems in Savage Worlds because I feel like it adds so much intensity to things. Dramatic tasks, chases, social conflicts. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things, but I think they add so much drama to the game and to the scene. And it allows players to be more creative in what they do and to help do the situations. So we actually did a social conflict this week in our game where we had like a trial scene because we were putting basically a bunch of people to death because we're the government and they were pirates who were kidnapping people and other things. So point being, so we were like, okay, cool, we've captured them, and before they get rescued, we're just going to have a trial for them and have them put away. So there we go. Cool. All right. Well, I hope you all had a great time tonight. I enjoyed being here and just talking through things, and I enjoy all the great conversation I'm seeing in the chat. So thank you all for talking and having a good time here. Again, just kind of a reminder, if you guys do have any thoughts on things or how we're doing things here at the Savage Goose, please let me know. Especially again the licensee section. If you guys like me doing that, please leave a comment that you're saying that you like it. Also, I did add memberships to the channel, so you can now become a member of the channel to help support the work I'm doing. I know I haven't been doing a great job of posting other content other than these live streams. I am working on a video with me and Pete Saloom, and we will be doing another video here soon. And then I also need to start working on recording some new videos. Two of the videos I want to do is specifically around things like what we're talking about today, of what are some like mistakes that people make when they come into Savage Worlds from other game systems, both as a GM and then another video as a player. And there's a few other things I want to look at. Probably a video about armor, because I've been seeing a lot of questions about armor lately and how armor works. And then maybe a video about how death and dying works in Savage Worlds. So look forward to those. Enjoy your day, and yeah, stay safe. Cheers, everybody.